Hi, everybody. Welcome to Summer Reading 2020. Imagine your story. This year, our theme was fairy tales, folk tales, mythology, and fantasy. I'm Miss Suzette, and I would like to share a couple of maybe my favorite fairy tales with you. The first one we're going to do comes from England. It's very old. It was retold by Joseph Jacobs in 1850. Now, the story, if you'll look right behind me, you'll see a plant. And on that plant, there's a boy and a giant and a castle. The title of this story is Jack and the Beanstalk. And this is how it goes. There was once upon a time an old widow who lived with her only son, Jack, and her cow, Milky White. Now, they were very, very poor. They all lived in the same little cottage, just a short distance out of town. Now, Milky White would give them milk every morning, and that milk they would take to the market and they would sell, and that's how they made their money to buy what little food they needed or, what seeds they needed to plant their garden. Well, one morning, Milky White didn't give any milk. And the old widow, she came out of the house. She was wringing her hands and she was going, "Oh dear, what shall we do? Oh dear, what shall we do?" Jack said, "Mom, cheer up." He said, "I'll just go out and find a job." She said, "Jack, we've tried that before and nobody will have you. I guess we're going to have to sell the cow." Jack said, "Mama, Milky White is like a member of our family. How are we going to sell a member of our family?" She said, "Jack, I know how you feel about that cow." She said, "But we need money for food and seed. We're going to have to sell Milky White." And Jack said, "Well, okay." He said, "I'm headed into town. It's market day. So I'll take Milky White with me and I'll see what kind of price I can get for her in the marketplace." So Jack was off. He reached up, grabbed the harness on Milky White, and the two of them headed off down the road. Now, they hadn't gone very far until Jack saw a strange-looking little old man. And the little man looked at him and said, "Good morning to you, Jack." Jack said, "Good morning, sir." And the whole time he was wondering, how does he know my name? "Where are you headed to, Jack, with that beautiful cow?" Jack said, "Well, I'm going into town. It's market day, and I'm going to see if I can sell Milky White here and get a halfway decent price because we need the money." The old man said, "You seem like a fairly smart boy." He said, "Let me ask you something." He said, "Do you know how to count 5 beans?" Jack said, "Sure I do." He said, "You got 2 in one hand, 2 in the other hand, and you got 1 in your mouth." Let me tell you, that boy was sharp as a tack. Now, the old man said, "Right you are." He said, "And since you're such a smart young man," he said, "how about I make a deal with you?" Jack said, "What kind of deal?" He said, "I'll give you these 5 magic beans if you give me your cow." Jack thought about it for a moment. He said, "I don't know about that." He said, "Now, did you understand what I said? These are magic beans." Jack said, "Are they really magic?" The little old man said, "They sure are." He said, "All you got to do is plant one of those beans or those 5 beans tonight, and in the morning, you'll have a stalk that goes all the way up into the sky." And he said, "Now, tell you what, Jack," he said, "if it doesn't work, then you just bring the beans back to me, and I'll give you the cow." Jack said, "Well, that's not too bad. At least I wouldn't lose the cow if it doesn't work." So he said, "Okay." So he took the 5 beans, he took them out of the little sack, and he put them in his pocket. Well, down the road he went. He headed home. Well, when he got home, it wasn't even dusk. His mother was in the house, and Jack walked in. She said, "My goodness gracious, you're back from town already. That was quick." She said, "Now see, you don't have the cow, so you must have gotten a good price." Jack said, "Mother, you'll never guess." She said, "Let me think. 5 pounds? 10 pounds? 15 pounds? Jack was going, "No." She said, "Come on, I'm sure you didn't get 20 pounds. Jack said, Mama, I told you couldn't guess. He said, I got 5 magic beans, and if we plant these beans tonight, she said, what did you just say? He said, I got 5 magic beans. She said, you are such a fool. She said, you needed to sell the cow. We needed the money to buy food and seed to plant our garden, and you traded Milky White for 5 miserable beans? She reached out, because Jack had been showing her the beans. She reached out, she grabbed them out of his hand, and she threw them out the window. She turned around and looked at Jack. She said, upstairs with you. And she said, and by the way, there's no supper for you tonight either. And then Jack saw his mother do something he'd never seen her do before. She started to cry. Well, Jack went on upstairs, and he sat there and he thought, how stupid I was. I should have known, not to sell the cow for just beans. Anyway, he said, and on top of that, now I've broken my mother's heart. He finally ended up drifting off to sleep. Well, when he got up the next morning, he noticed that his room looked a little strange. I mean, he had some sunlight coming in, but part of his room was still really shaded, and that was unusual. So he quickly got out of bed, and he put his clothes on, and he went over to the window, and I bet you can't guess what he saw. Outside his window was a beanstalk. It was twisted and twirled, and it went right on up through the clouds. Jack said, wow, the little man was right. These are magic beans. He said, this beanstalk is just like a ladder. He said, I wonder what's up past the clouds. So Jack just jumped right out of the window, grabbed hold of the beanstalk, and up and up and up and up and up and up he climbed until he popped right through the clouds. And right in front of him was a road straight as a dart. And at the end of that road, there was a very large house, almost like a castle. Well, Jack thought he'd just wander on up and see what else he could find. So he was wandering up the road, and just as he got next to the big, huge door, it opened, and a very big, tall woman was standing there. And Jack just looked up and he said, good morning to you, ma'am, just as polite as he could be. And she looked down and she said, good morning to you. He said, excuse me, ma'am. He said, but I haven't eaten since day before yesterday. And he said, I'm awfully hungry. He said, you think you could give me some breakfast? She said, breakfast. It's been a long time since I've had a boy in my house for breakfast. She said, I think I can. She said, but I'll tell you what, you'll have to eat it quickly. You'll have to eat it before my husband, the giant, gets up. So she took Jack in. She gave him a great big biscuit. He had some strawberry jam, and she gave him a great big jug of sweet milk. And Jack was just enjoying himself, eating in that breakfast. And then all of a sudden, they heard a sound. It was thud, 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 thud. And the old woman said, oh, dear, the old tall woman, she said, oh, dear, this is not good. That is my husband. You've got to hide, and you've got to do it quickly. So she reached down and helped Jack. She just picked him up by the collar. She lifted up a teacup and stuck him under it and put the teacup back down. Well, in through the doors came the giant, and he was something to behold. Now, Jack was peeking out from underneath the edge of that teacup. He looked at him and he said, oh, gosh, he's horrible. He had orange, spiky hair. He had bloodshot eyes. His teeth were green, and his fingernails were long, and they had dirt and gunk all underneath him. I mean, it was enough to make you sick. He said, wife, where's my breakfast? He said, what's that I smell? Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread. The big tall woman said, Husband, I don't know what you're talking about. She said, we haven't had a boy in here in years. She said, it is just your imagination. That's all it is. It is your imagination. There is nobody here but me. She said, now you run out and wash up. By the time you get back, I'll have your breakfast ready. So the giant got up. He went out. Now Jack lifted up the teacup because he was going to run. He was going to get out of there. But the very big, tall woman said, no, wait a minute. She said, don't leave yet. She said, after the giant eats breakfast, he always takes a little nap, and that'll be the time you need to leave. Jack said, well, okay. So he went back underneath the teacup. When the giant came back into the room, he had a hen underneath one arm, and he had a basket of gold eggs in the other hand. Well, he walked right up to the table. His breakfast was ready. He ate it. He had sat the hen down on the table. He sat the basket down on the other, and he just slurped up that breakfast. And then he said, Hen, lay. And the hen laid a golden egg. The giant picked it up and put it in the basket with the others. And then he told his wife, he said, Wife, bring me my harp. She brought his golden harp to him, and it began to play beautiful, soft music. And then from the giant's pocket, he took a few coins and he dropped them onto the table, and he began to count. 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 10. He was sound asleep. He was snoring so loud that the house was just wiggling back and forth. Jack thought, okay, now's my chance. So he sneaks out from under the teacup. Now he goes over and he thinks, I might as well take this golden hen with me. She'll be a good asset to our house. So he reaches out and grabs her, puts her under his arm. Now, as he started to go past the harp, he noticed that there was a pretty face engraved on the front of the harp. And even though it was playing beautiful music, the beautiful face of the girl, there was a tear running down it. So he said, okay, I'll take the harp too. So he did it, stuck it under his arm along with the chicken and the hen. And then he thought, might as well take a few of these coins while I'm standing here. So he took a few and stuck them in his pocket. Jack starts tiptoeing towards the door. The harp under his arm, the hen under his arm, and the gold in his pocket. Well, just as he got to that door and was about to step out, the hen began to cluck. And she clucked so loudly that it woke up the giant. And he said, Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman, and there he be. The giant jumped out of his chair, which toppled over, and then he ran to the door, and Jack was already outside. He was running as fast as he could go down that road, headed back towards the Beanstalk. The giant was right behind him. When Jack got there, of course, he grabbed hold of the beanstalk and began to climb down, down, down. But the giant was only about 20 yards behind him. And all of a sudden, the giant looked and he didn't see Jack anymore. He couldn't figure out exactly what happened. So he finally got over there, and when he looked down through the clouds, he saw Jack going down. The giant reached out, grabbed hold of the beanstalk, and swung himself onto it. The beanstalk quivered. But he started to climb down, down, down. Jack looked up and saw the giant was coming down after him, and he was climbing as fast as he could. He happened to look down, and he saw that his mother was standing outside, and he said, Mom, get the axe. When he hit the ground, his mother was standing there with the axe. Jack took it out of her hand, and whack, 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 he hit the beanstalk. It trembled and it shivered, and then suddenly with one whack, the beanstalk toppled over, falling and crashing to the ground, killing the giant. Now, Jack told his mother about everything. He showed her the hen that laid the golden eggs. He showed her the harp that played beautiful music. And he showed her all the coins that he had in his pocket. And for a while, they lived very happily on those coins that were in his pocket. But after a while, of course, the coins ran out. But then they didn't have to worry because they had the hen that laid the golden eggs. So, Jack and his mother lived happily ever after with beautiful harp music in the afternoon and enough golden eggs to take care of them the rest of their life. And that's the end of our story. Our next story is a fairy tale. It was written by Hans Christian Andersen. And of course, it's a story about a princess and a prince. Oh, wait a minute. We cannot do a story about a princess if I don't have my tiara on. I mean, after all, you cannot do a program about a princess without your tiara. So I'm going to put mine on. There we go. Now, once upon a time, there was a prince. Very handsome young man. And the only thing he wanted to do was marry a princess. Well, it couldn't be just an ordinary princess. She had to be a real princess. And sometimes that's kind of hard to figure out. So the prince started traveling all around the world, trying to find the perfect princess. Now, there was not a shortage of princesses. They were everywhere. The only problem was every time he picked one up, there was a little something off about her. Or she was a little peculiar about this. And so the poor prince, he comes back home. He doesn't have a princess to show the queen or the king because he never found one. Now, he had been home for several days, and that one particular night there was a terrible storm. The lightning was flashing, the thunder was rolling, and the wind was beating against the castle windows. When a bell at the city gate began to ring. Now, that usually meant there was a visitor. So the king, he goes out and he goes to the gate. He opens it up and oh my goodness. Standing there was a beautiful young woman. But heavens to Murgatroyd, what a sight she was. She had rain dripping down her hair. It was dripping off her clothes. It was running into the toe of her shoes and out the heel. And she said she was a real princess. Well, the king escorted her back in, and she told the queen that she was a real princess. Now, the queen was a very clever lady. So she takes the young girl, gets her dry clothes, and asks her a few questions, and she said, I'll go and prepare your room where you will sleep tonight. So the queen and her maid go into the room. There's a huge bed there. They take the mattress off, and the queen takes a little tiny green pea, and she places it on the bed. And then she puts the mattress back on top of the pea, and the pea, of course, is on the frame. Well, then on top of that mattress, she puts 20 more mattresses. And on top of those 20 mattresses, she puts 20 cotton comforters. And then she brings the young lady in. Now, the queen knew she could figure out if she was a real princess for sure. Well, the young girl came in and she saw where she was supposed to sleep, and she said, oh my goodness. Queen said, no problem. We have a ladder over here for you to climb up. So the princess says goodnight, and she climbs all the way up, and she crawls into bed. Everyone else goes to bed. Now, bright and early the next morning, King and queen were up, the prince was there, and out comes this young girl who says she is a real princess. And the queen said, "Well, my dear, how did you sleep?" And the young girl said, "I hardly closed my eyes all night." She said, "I don't know what's wrong with that bed and those mattresses." She said, "But it was so hard." And she said, "There's got to be something there somewhere." She said, "I am black and blue all over my body. I could not get any sleep." And the queen says, "Son, you have a real princess." Only a real princess would be that sensitive to be black and blue from a little teeny pea that's underneath 40 mattresses along with the comforters. So they married. Now they took that little pea and they put it into a little box, and they took that little box and they put it into the castle museum. And as far as I know, that box with the pea in it is still in the castle museum. That is, unless somebody stole it. But anyway, the prince and the princess were married, and they lived happily ever after. That's the end of our story. Our next story comes from Japan. It's called The Farmer and the Spider Weaver. And this is how it goes. Long ago in Japan, back in the time of mysteries, there lived a farmer. Now, he was not a rich farmer. He had just a little small place and a little small garden. But you know, if you've got a garden, you have to keep the weeds out of it. So this farmer hoed in his garden every day. He would be out there just hoeing the weeds every day. And with the vegetables that he grew, he managed to sell in the marketplace, and that's how he got his money to buy his rice or whatever he might need. Now, one morning, he was out hoeing in his garden when all of a sudden, he saw a snake slithering through his garden, and it was about to strike at a poor defenseless little spider. Now, the little spider had seen the snake coming too and was about to jump off into the tall grass, but the farmer thought to himself, "Oh no, I will not let this snake have that little spider. That little spider's been in my garden eating all the nasty bugs, keeping them off of my crop." So the farmer took his hoe and he chased that snake right out of the garden. Now, when he turned around and looked at the little spider who was about to jump off into the tall grass, the little spider seemed to bow. So the farmer, he bowed back. Now, that night, the farmer went home. He fixed his supper. He went to bed as usual. But something strange happened just before dawn. He heard singing, and it seemed to be coming from his front yard. So he got up, he went to his door and opened it up. Well, lo and behold, standing in his front yard was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She had long black hair that fell all the way to her knees, and she was wearing a beautiful, colorful kimono. And she said, "Farmer, I understand you need someone to weave for you." She said, "Good farmer, let me stay, and I will weave for you every day." Now, the farmer thought about it for a minute, and he said, "Yes, if she can weave fabric as beautiful as that her kimono is made out of," he said, "then I can sell the vegetables and the cloth in the marketplace, and it won't be long before I'll be a rich man." So he said, yes. He invited her in. He took her all the way to the back to a little small room. He opened the door and he said, "Here you may sleep, you may eat, and you may weave." She said, "Thank you, good farmer." And she closed the door. Now, the next morning, he went out, hoed his garden just like usual, came back to the house, and he went straight to that weaving room door, and he knocked. And a voice from inside said, "Good farmer, you may enter." Well, he opened the door, and he could hardly believe his eyes the room was already half filled with beautiful fabric. And he said, How? How have you managed to weave so much fabric so quickly, so beautifully? She said, Good farmer, listen to me. You must never ever ask me how I weave, and you must never watch me weave, for if you do, I will have to leave. So the farmer agreed. Now, this went on for quite a while. He still could not believe his eyes every time he went back and knocked on the door, and she said, Good farmer, you may enter. The room was half filled, more than half filled, with beautiful cloth. Now, the farmer was selling some of it in town along with his vegetables, and yes, he was becoming a very wealthy man. But now one morning he got up early, headed for his little garden to hoe the weeds, and he got about halfway there, and he remembered that he had left his lunch on the kitchen table. So he turned around to go back and get it. Well, the path that went back to the house went right past the weaving room window. And when the farmer got there, he couldn't help himself. He had to look. But he was astonished, for inside that room, there was no beautiful woman. There was a spider, and it was weaving with all 8 of its legs as fast as it could, and thread was coming right out of its mouth, the beautiful crystal thread. And the little spider was singing, Weaving is what spiders do, so I'll weave the whole day through. The farmer realized that that was the spider, and that she was thanking the farmer for saving her life. And then the farmer remembered what she had told him, that he must never ever ask her how she weaved, and he must never watch her weave, or she would have to leave. And so quickly he ducked down below the window, went around, got his lunch, headed back to the field. He worked all day hoeing the weeds, but he kept singing that little song. Weaving is what spiders do, so I'll weave the whole day through. When he got back that night, he went to the weaving room door and he knocked. And she said, Good farmer, you may enter. She said, I am so glad to see you. She said, For you see, I have run out of the cotton thread that I used to weave with, and without it I can weave no more. The farmer said, That's no problem. He said, In the morning I will go to the village and I will buy up all the cotton thread that you need. And that's exactly what he did. When he got up the next morning, he went straight to the village. He bought up all the cotton thread he could find, and then he started home. Now, the village was quite some distance away to begin with. So by the time he got ready to leave, it was just about noon and it was hot. And that sack was getting heavy. So he only walked a couple of miles before he thought, I'm just going to have to sit down. I've got to take a little nap before I can go any further. So he sat down underneath a tree. He sat the sack next to him, and he drifted off to sleep. And that's when it happened. Sliding out of the tall grass came the snake, recognized the farmer as the one that had chased him, and he said, now's my chance. He crawled into the cotton sack and coiled up down on the bottom. When the farmer woke up, he realized he'd slept way too long, so he just reached down, grabbed the sack, threw it over his shoulder, headed home as fast as he could go. When he got there, he went straight to the weaving room door. He knocked. She said, Good farmer, you may enter. He opened the door. He said, Here is the cotton thread you need to weave with. She took it, thanked him, and closed the door. Now, she sat the sack on the floor right next to her, and she opened it up. Now, if you remember, I told you that that cotton thread was coming right out of her mouth. So she began to eat the cotton out of the sack. And she ate, and she ate, and she ate, and she ate, until she was so fat she could hardly move. And all of a sudden, the sack moved. It fell over, and the snake slithered out, recognized that spider, and began to chase her all the way around the room. She quickly climbed up the windowsill, jumped out into the tall grass, but the snake was right behind her. She was so full of cotton thread that she could hardly move, and the snake was gaining on her. Now, it was just about time for the sun to go down and the moon to come up. But the sun looked down and saw that little spider, realized that all she was doing was spinning her thanks to the farmer, and the sun thought, no, I'm not going to let this happen. And so with the last burst of energy that the sun had, it shot down a sunbeam that landed right in front of that little spider. She reached down and she grabbed hold of it, and she climbed it up and up and up and up she went until she was right up there next to the sun, leaving the snake down on the ground. She looked at the sun. She said, thank you. You have saved my life. She said, from now on, I will weave for you. And she was so full of cotton thread that she began to weave almost immediately. She began to weave big, white, fluffy, cottony clouds for the sun. Now, you may not think this story's true. So let's say today or tomorrow you go out. I want you to look up, because that little spider is still up there somewhere, weaving those big, white, fluffy, cottony clouds for the sun. That's the end of our story.